Trevor Lawrence, extending him is going to start heating up here in Jacksonville. How much is Trevor Lawrence worth, and what do the Jags have to do differently? I'll tell you right now on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up? Good morning, good people. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am your host of the Locked On Jaguars, Tony Wiggins. I'm your host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, Tony Wiggins. There you go. I had to get that order correctly. We thank you for making us your first listen here at Locked On Jaguars because it's your team every day. Also, letting you know that we're free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. You don't have to pay for it. Just make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube page as well. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll hear Locked On Jaguars. We're going to talk Trevor Lawrence. We're going to talk extensions. That'll likely, those talks will start heating up this season. And I'm going to tell you the motivation for what today's show is all about. It's this Lamar Jackson situation and the franchise tag and exclusive and looking like he's not being appreciated for what he's already done for the franchise. And teams can't pay for a guy that has a knack for getting hurt, but he got hurt laying it on the line for the team. So this is why guys want to get paid. It's also why guys need agents, and we'll discuss that a little bit too. But mainly we're going to focus on Trevor Lawrence, what he means to Jacksonville, how much it's going to cost to extend him, and why something Trent Baalke said the other day at the Combine makes total sense. Absolutely makes total sense, but it still has to be executed. So first and foremost, Trevor Lawrence is in the third year of a rookie deal. If you add in the fifth-year option, the Jaguars have 3 more years of Trevor Lawrence, technically, where they don't have to do anything. That's usually not the way it works. Trevor's entering his third season. You would think that, from what I heard, that they're going to start extension talks like right now and possibly get him extended earlier than suspected. What's the going rate for Trevor Lawrence? If Daniel Jones and Geno Smith can get anywhere between $25 and $40 million, and people are unsure about their prowess as potential long-term answers at quarterback. When you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence, when you're not unsure, and he does check all the boxes, what does his extension look like? And should Trevor Lawrence wait for both Lamar Jackson and for Justin Herbert and possibly even Joe Burrow to get their money so he could reset the market? Or do you just jump out the window and go early? All of those things are worth it. The number that I start at with Trevor Lawrence is $400 million. And I know I tell people all the time not to pay so much attention to the whole number. In this case, you can pay attention to the whole number because I would suspect that 75% of this whole number is going to be guaranteed. And normally, I think the guaranteed amount usually comes in around 61, 62% or 62 and a half. No, I think the whole number here is important because I think if you talk about Trevor Lawrence and $400 million, you're looking at $300 million guaranteed. The question is how long? How long of a contract? 8 years? 8 into 400 is 50. So let me tell you this too. This is the way it was put to me. Like folks were saying, well, and I've said it, the whole number doesn't matter. The per year doesn't matter. What really matters in a contract extension is the guaranteed money and the years in the contract. And that's what really matters because the bonus money and the guaranteed money, the bonus will be obviously cash in hand. There's 2 different guarantees too. There's a guarantee at signing and there's the injury guarantee. So some of the money, when you say guarantee, I used to laugh when I saw it. It would say like, he signed a 5-year, $100 million with $25 million guaranteed at signing, and up to another $15 million, which up to $40 million guaranteed. So that up to is not guaranteed. How can you have two guarantees, right? Well, one is an injury guarantee, and the other is a guarantee. Usually is money that's either going to be put in your hand or you're definitely going to get it. So the difference is teams with guaranteed money have to put that money in escrow. And that's the issue that Lamar Jackson, agentless Lamar Jackson, is having right now. Hypothetically, someone gives you a contract guaranteeing you $250 million fully guaranteed, and then they fall on hard times. How do you get your money? The only recourse would be a player actually trying to sue the NFL. And the NFL ain't getting involved in that stuff. Like, for instance, right now, I don't know that Washington's franchise has ever not paid anybody, but with the turmoil that they've been going through and all of the things in the news and talking about finances and the owner borrowing money, potentially allegedly borrowing money they weren't supposed to and not reporting or whatever, I wouldn't think that I would be safe to get my money unless they put it in escrow. So I think the hesitance of a lot of these teams is I'm not sitting here taking $250 million in cash and putting it in escrow. I'm just not going to do that. And I think that's the holdup with a bunch of teams. Plus, the arguments that we like to have are, well, Lamar's banged up. Like Lamar Jackson, he's banged up right now, and he hasn't finished the season in 2 years. Why would you pay him? Well, he got banged up for the team. And I know you can't pay guys for what they have done in the past, but it's kind of how this works. And this is kind of why you need an agent, because an agent will say that you're going to pay a dude for what he's done in the past. And we're not going to have that problem here in Jacksonville. That's the motivation for me doing this today is Jacksonville's not going to have this problem. So here's a couple of things that I'm going to address. They have another problem that's going to come up when they pay Trevor Lawrence. And that problem is that's going to limit who they can pay and how much more they're able to pay other people, which means they have to get the drafting part of it right, which means they have to be solid in their pro and personnel department, which means I have to have probably a little more confidence in Trent Baalke to do that than I have in the past. Now, his track record as of late indicates to me that he's worthy of the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to be able to do that. So he mentioned it at the combine that the Jaguars are going to get beyond spending money in free agency, and they're going to start focusing more on the draft, developing and retaining their own people. Why is that important? And what on earth does that have to do with a contract extension? There's a lot to do with a contract extension, and it is totally, totally relevant. And I'm going to tell you why here in just a second on Locked on Jaguars. I have to let you know that today's sponsor for our show is FanDuel, and I could not be happier to say those words because I've been a huge fan and a huge user of FanDuel for an awfully long time. And I am so glad to be able to introduce them to you. Now, for new listeners, since the midway point of the NBA season is beyond us and they're getting to that three-quarter contra, new users need to understand that no sweat first bet. What is that? That means up to $1,000 you can get a no sweat first bet. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. That's right. If you lose, that's what you get. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. You need to get your information from FanDuel as well before you make your wagers. Read up and listen. Look at the research that they have for you, and they won't steer you wrong. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And we're rolling along here on Locked on Jaguars as we do every day because it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. We're talking about Trevor Lawrence and a potential um, contract extension. Also, any new listeners, thank you for joining Locked On Jaguars. I said join. I didn't say peep in. You join because once you come here, you are automatically part of the family. So thank you. Come on in, sit down, and relax. Trevor Lawrence, what's the number? The number's like 400 million. Is Trevor the $400 million man? I would think so. And I would think a large portion of that, 75% of that, would be 300 million. And I think those are the guarantees that you're going to see. Trevor's going to be king of the North now, the king of the South for a long time here in Jacksonville. And there are a lot of teams around the league that are either pressured with guys that they have doubts about or that have already paid people that are one-hit wonders and they pay people for performance when they don't think that those guys are Super Bowl winners. You think Seattle thinks Geno Smith is going to win the Super Bowl? And I know this is not a good time for Geno slander because Geno won the most improved player and comeback player, whatever it was, and he played really well after such a long time of being doubted by people. And I don't want to be one of those people. But then I ask you again, do you think they're going to win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith having to compete against the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Trevor Lawrence? And well, the answer is probably no, they don't. But Geno has earned the right to be given the opportunity to fail because of his performance on the field this year, and likely because of his ability to have a good work ethic and do the things that we don't see that allows the team to have trust in it, right? So having a franchise quarterback is extremely important, but also knowing who you are and what you are is just as important, and knowing what you have to do to build a team a certain way is just as important. So the Jaguars don't have that problem. The Jaguars have a franchise quarterback. The Jaguars have a guy that coming in the next season will be considered a top 6 quarterback by everyone with a brain, and that's justifiably so. The thing that gets me is when I listened to Trent Baalke last week, and he said we need to start focusing on drafting and retaining and not so much spending in free agency, we had a tendency to forget that one of the reasons for that is, and when I say we, I'm talking about me here at Locked On Jaguars. One of the reasons that I focus more on Trent saying that for other reasons, and I thought the reasons were because that's just the way that you're supposed to do it, right? You're supposed to build through the draft, and that's what everybody always says. And one of the things that we've said in the past is people always talk about building through the draft, and they're the first ones to sign guys first 2 or 3 days of free agency because it's tempting to do that. And it's, you can get better really, really fast. Trent was right. And the reason why he's right is because of reasons that I did not think of. And those reasons are because Trevor Lawrence is on a rookie deal, and pretty soon he's going to be off a rookie deal, right? So you say, well, why don't they just go ahead and while he's on a rookie deal, just load up? Because I think you have to start training yourself to operate a certain way and have a certain rule about the way that you function when you build your team. Get used to it now. If you draft it well, and they have the last couple of years, they've had a pretty good track record of drafting. That's why this is going to be important this year, because this is the first one in a long time where the Jaguars aren't picking very high. So they got to make these picks count, right? And it's also why the Calvin Ridley trade, who's being reinstated, was so brilliant, is because they got a number one receiver for damn near nothing. And that's rare and hard to do, to get a good player for nothing in this league. So kudos to them for that. This thing is set up. They have 3 offensive linemen, and they got to make the decision on, well, technically they have 2 starters at left tackle, but they're going to have, at tackle. So they have to make a decision if they're not able to keep Juwan Taylor, who I would try to keep, but I get it, because you don't want to, if you set a price for a person, when you set a value, don't want to exceed that, and you need to start practicing that. You can't exceed what you think a player's worth, no matter how much that player means to your team individually. You have to get into these frugal practices where you're not paying a person $1 more than what they're worth. Even though you may have done that before, you cannot do that now. It's going to be very, very important. They're going to be dealing with less money and possibly more success. The more success you have, the better all of these players seem to think that they are, and the more they seem to think that they're valued in free agency. So if you're having more success, you're going to have more people with their hand out saying, "Nah, give me mine," and the attention that comes along with is going to be the attention that comes along with being good. So now you're going to have guys who inflate their own value, rightfully so, because they'll have in their DNA what it's like to win. And by them inflating their own value, you're going to have a tougher time keeping guys that you wouldn't have a tough time keeping beyond that. So that's why it's going to be imperative that you draft well. And not only do you get it right from getting players who can play, you got to get it right in players who play certain positions to fill in for the guys who are leaving. The really, really good teams, because they're so good, they don't have a whole bunch of room for a lot of rookies unless you're like the Kansas City Chiefs the last couple of years where they were losing people, okay? They were losing people in free agency or losing people who wanted more money, and they had to find replacements for those players, but it had to be inexpensive, and the only place you get inexpensive talent is in the draft or in free agency after the draft, and that is exactly what they were able to do. So don't discount the fact that when you look at Kansas City, you say, how does all of these rookies make this team that's really good? You know why? Because the Chiefs are letting a bunch of guys go, whether it's Tyreek Hill, whether it's DeMarcus, not DeMarcus Walker, the wide receiver from University of Florida that plays for Baltimore. They were letting these guys hit free agency. Some of those running backs, think about the running backs. Think about the older linemen that they got rid of, that they had to replace. Think about the secondary guys that weren't panning out, and they had to decide to make it. So there's two ways to do it. You can either be a team that drafts well, which they are, or a team that is in contention for a championship, and you can get guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, and you can get guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and those type of players to take these prove-it deals because they know they're going to win and they're going to be put in a better position. But you have to get to that point. You have to be able to evaluate, and you have to be able to identify guys who can play. Will the Jags have any trouble signing Trevor Lawrence? No, they won't. And I'll tell you why here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. Rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, we're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Trevor Lawrence, is he a $400 million man? Is he a $500 million man? I'm going to touch whether or not he needs to wait until some guys who were drafted before him sign their deal so he can reset the market. But I'll tell you why that's not a problem. I don't think that's a problem for Trevor, because though I don't expect him or anybody else to ever take a hometown discount, I do believe the Jaguars, by acting earlier and extending him earlier, will get him under contract, be able to put way more money than his pocket. I'm not going to say Trevor. I don't know what Trevor's home life was like, but they're going to put way more money in his pocket than a lot of people have ever seen. Trevor Lawrence doesn't seem to be moved by money. Now, that's not going to help the Jaguars when they negotiate because, like I said, no hometown discounts. Plus, his agent is going to work for him. And this is why, once again, Lamar Jackson needed an agent. Your agent is going to do what's right for you, even when you don't want to do right for yourself. So let's just say Trevor was like, come on, man, just it doesn't matter. Just give me $35 million a year. I don't want to handicap the team. Let's just do what we have to do. That would be very, very noble. That's just not the way this works. And we shouldn't expect it to work like that. We want the players who are worth those expensive contracts to get them all. And that means that everybody else has to do their job, right? And you just have to be more frugal about how you divvy up funds and give out money after the fact. But I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a problem, because as long as they keep Doug Peterson as the coach, I just think Trevor Lawrence might believe that, oh, I don't know, making $400 million here in Jacksonville is better than making $500 million in New York or LA. Those are one of the, that's not a hometown discount. What that is it's a relative discount, or it's making the money that you might get here relative to the money that you might get somewhere else. Doug Peterson is going to be, I think, a huge part of that, is because I think, unlike some of the other marriages that we've seen, i.e. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, or at some point Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, I think the relationship between Doug and Trevor is so good. I think it's more like Doug's predecessor. I think it's more like Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, where those guys are joined at the hip. They have the same common goal. They probably get along way better than any of us even know about. That's the sense that I get from Doug and Trevor. And I really do think, for our sake here, that the best thing is to try to imagine a world where they came in together, even though Trevor got here a year before Doug, but that they leave together, that Doug doesn't leave here for 15 years and Trevor is the quarterback for the next 15 years, and they walk out of here together, because I want to join them at the hip, because I just think it creates a situation where there's continuity, and then there's just this feeling of family that's going to be able to help the Jaguars down the road when it comes to signing players and having to fill in players. When you have that franchise quarterback, you know exactly what you have. And you can now, I've said this in the past, you build your team. You don't have to overcompensate. You don't have to draft guys that have to do way more than they're capable of doing. And the reason why some teams have to do that, the Jaguars had to do it. The Jaguars had to draft players, and it got to the point where in 2018, I believe the Jaguars still had a top 5 defense, but people thought that wasn't good enough because the quarterback was so bad that the defense had to do everything, right? So when you have a really, really good quarterback, I'm not telling you that means the players can be less. No. When you have a really, really good quarterback, I think it takes the pressure off of the evaluator to have to go get guys that are going to prop your quarterback up, as opposed you can go get guys that can just do their job and your quarterback is going to build them up. And I think that's the advantage of having Trevor Lawrence, which means there's an advantage of getting him under contract early. Does he sign it? Does he do it now? Or does he wait until, if he wants to reset the market, Trevor Lawrence can wait until guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert who were picked ahead of him. You can take a look and see what's going to happen with Lamar, but what's going to happen with Lamar is not what's going to happen with those guys that have agents. I'm telling you. And I promised that I was going to touch on that, and I will in just a second. But make no mistake about it, as I look down here at my notes, make no mistake, this is one point that I wanted to make, that even though we're headed to, at some point, having to pay a franchise quarterback, it is a better feeling having to pay a guy like that than not having that guy to pay. And furthermore, paying a guy who's not that guy. I don't care what stats say. I'll take it to my grave that Kirk Cousins ain't worth the money that the Vikings gave him and continue to give him. Statistically, sure. Do you want him as your quarterback? Think about it. So you could be a situation where you don't have that guy to pay, which the Jaguars haven't had for a long time, if they ever have. Or you can be in a situation where you're already paying a dude that's, Daniel Jones might be the same guy, right? I mentioned Geno, that you got to pay something, you got to pay him, but you know deep down inside that person isn't that guy. The Jaguars have that guy. So whatever you got to do is worth it. Doesn't matter. We got that guy. That's the most important thing, that the Jaguars got the guy. Now, let me tie this agent thing in here with Lamar Jackson real quick, because there's certain people that didn't really understand it. I'm not one of those dudes going to tell you, just say you don't know what an agent does without saying you don't know what an agent. I'm not going to do all of that. Let's just say I'm an agent, right? And I can talk to teams about this really good pass rush I have, right? Or this kid coming out in the draft. I can also gauge from those teams whether or not they would be interested in Lamar, and it would be strictly off the record and totally against the tampering rules. But if I initiate that and I say, hey, man, what would the market be? They would have known what Lamar Jackson's market was before he jumped out the window and got out here and now has every single team that everyone tried to connect to him saying that they ain't interested. Now everybody's screaming collusion, and I don't think you can prove that. But these are things that an agent would know. These are things that he's paid to do. And folks call agents greedy all day, greedy. And so somebody even said that's why I'm glad he doesn't have an agent, because they're just greedy and all they do is take your money and blah, blah, blah. Let me explain something to you. If you think that Lamar Jackson is just negotiating, I think people think Lamar Jackson is negotiating with John Harbaugh or Eric DaCosta or Ozzie or even the owner. You know who's at front and center of all of that? A nameless guy you don't know that has a law degree. Their counsel, they're sitting there telling them what they should and shouldn't do. Lamar Jackson and whoever he has as his advisor are walking into a proverbial boardroom to deal with a bunch of sharks. And whoever he has with him is a goldfish. You don't negotiate millions and millions of dollars, $500 million potentially. You don't go in talking to billionaires and their attorneys and guys that are wearing $5,000 suits. And then on the other side of the table, they got a number cruncher. And it's all he does, and he pays attention to what the trends are and what everybody. You don't go in there with your auntie or whoever it is thinking you negotiate with these people. This is one of the reasons he's running into what he's running into, and people can put it on collusion and all of this stuff. No, I'm going to tell you a red flag with me with Lamar Jackson. Y'all ready what it is? And I know it's the Jaguars podcast, but I want to say this because this means that you guys are really, really that how grateful the Jaguar fans are to have Trevor Lawrence. One of the things with Lamar Jackson is this. I'm not sure I want a franchise quarterback that's not smart enough to realize that he needs an agent in order to deal with me on a $500 million contract. It's a lot more going into it than just the numbers. It's all kinds of stuff. And I'm sure somebody says, well, he doesn't have an agent. That doesn't mean he's not paying a lawyer by the hour in order to negotiate. I want somebody to get that young man and tell him. We could talk about agents being greedy. Yeah, you know what? They might be greedy, but guess who they're greedy for? They can't get what they ain't getting for you. If they get a small percentage, and it's not 10 to 30%, it's more like 3 to 6%, but that's okay. The more they get for you, the more they get for themselves. So what's their motivation? If it's to make themselves rich, that's fine, but they got to make themselves rich by making you rich first. You need an agent. Even if it's something as simple as this, you need somebody thinking about all of this stuff that's going to handle it for you. And you don't need to be doing it by yourself because you need to be somewhere studying and learn how to be a better quarterback. To me, a red flag, and why a lot of these teams saying, you know what, I ain't dealing with this, is because I'm telling you, it's the opposite of the fact that, do I want the leader of my franchise? Am I going to give $500 million to a dude that doesn't realize that he needs an agent to negotiate a $500 million contract because it's probably this damn thick? You're going to tell me Lamar Jackson and his auntie or whoever it is, you think they're that versed in the NFLPA and all of the rules and everything that's going to. I'm trying to get a house and it's 30 pages and it's driving me crazy. And this dude's negotiating a $500 million contract by himself with one of his family members. I just don't get it, and I don't understand why people think. I know social media makes a lot of us seem a lot smarter, and I said us, than we really, really are. But I can guarantee you that people that are saying that he doesn't need an agent don't understand what agents do. I'd never defend myself in court, no matter how convincing I am. I let somebody else do it because I know I get in there and say something that I'm not supposed to. It's the same thing. But we don't have those problems because we have Trevor Lawrence. I've already set the number at $400 million. So what say you? You let me know on social media. Is that going to be enough? And if it's not, we'll give him some more because it's not our money. It belongs to Shad Khan. But this is my podcast, and you will be here with me again tomorrow on Locked On Jaguars because that's what we do. It's your team every day. And I'm going to thank you in advance for making me your first listen. Till tomorrow, take care.